Hello, everybody. Welcome to our MBA week session on essays. Super excited for this one. It's going to be a great one. If you are joining from the MBA kickoff event, welcome. We're happy to have you on here. The essays is always a standout part of MBA week. I'm super excited about this. I know that there's a lot of questions and angst that goes into the MBA essay portion of the application. We'll get super tactical. We'll cover everything that you need to know to get started, and then send you to the rest of the amazing events for MBA week. Okay, if you didn't hear this in the last session, if you want access to any of the recordings from this week and a bunch of other deals and resources and lots of other goodies, make sure that you've created an account on Leland. It's free. You just have to sign up. That's how we get the event recordings to you. So if you haven't done that already, make sure to do so. You can scan the QR code right here. We will also send the link in the chat. With that, let's get started. And again, this is writing standout application essays as part of MBA week. Okay, we just had the MBA overview. Now this is the essay portion. As you can see, we've got a ton of different events this week. Highly recommend going to as many of them live as you can. I know that there's a lot and we do recordings, but you can ask questions, you can engage with the people in the audience. We're doing giveaways at a bunch of different ones, so try and get to as many of these live as you can. Every single one of them is hosted by the best of the best of the Leland MBA coaches, so it's a great way to learn and grow with these coaches as well. Some quick logistics, ask questions in the chat. We have a lot of you here, so it's a helpful exercise to think if the questions that you're asking would be applicable or helpful to other people in the chat. If so, please send them. We'll try to get to them as many as we can. Make sure RSVP for each session that you're interested in, so you can get the links to join and all of the things. Even if you're not sure if you can make it, RSVP to join. Join each event again live to access the giveaways and all the good stuff that we're doing, and then make sure to sign up to receive the recordings. We get a lot of questions on that. So if you would like access to recordings, make sure that you've created a free account and we will get it to you. Okay, agenda. Let's do some quick welcome and introductions, and we'll dive right into the panel. We got a lot to cover today, and then we will wrap up at the end. Quick welcome introductions. My name is Amelia. I run content at Leland. It is my job to help you get access to the different resources and content that you need to get into MBA programs and whatever else that you need. I am super passionate about democratizing access to resources for MBA that have historically been a little bit gatekept and other goals. So if there's ever anything that I can do to help you achieve your goals, whether that's get into an MBA program or anything else, please reach out. You'll also see Leland Events, which is Amanda. Huge shout out to her and the rest of the events team. There is so much work that goes into putting on MBA week and all of these sessions. They do so much. So shout out to Amanda and all the events team for doing this. The real stars of the show, though, are not us. I am excited to introduce you to the superstars. Dione, Mike, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone here? Dione, let's start with you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dione. I'm alumna of Stanford GSB and Stanford University. I've been with Leland for quite a while, and even longer than that, been doing admissions consulting for more than a dozen years. And even further back, when I was an MBA student, I was on the Admissions Advisory Council then. So I'm happy to share what I've learned about writing standout essays.
Thanks, Dione. Mike, take it away.
Very well. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mike. I attended the GSB many years ago and then went to work at the GSB, first as the director of their Center for Leadership Development and Research, and essentially led the introduction of today's MBA core leadership curriculum. And then I took over the mid-career program, the MSX program, and in doing so, I was also responsible for admissions. And so for a decade, I played that role and really had to become a student of admissions, within the GSB and learn the process, learn the criteria and, a lot of the science behind thinking about admissions from a school's perspective, from a programmatic perspective. And so since leaving, I didn't plan to go into admissions coaching or consulting, but some people approached me about doing it, and I found that A, I loved it, B, I was missing a lot of the opportunities to talk to people, and C, I actually knew quite a bit about, essentially the process. So it's been nice to hopefully share some of that knowledge and expertise, demystify the process a bit. And, ultimately, I still feel like I'm playing a role of helping the right people find the right slots at the right schools. And that's, sort of my mission is it's still focused on leadership development, honestly, more than just, kind of getting people into school. That's a means to an end. So glad to be here.
Thanks, guys. Allie is actually currently teaching our MBA application bootcamp. She'll be on in just a little bit. We'll talk about the bootcamp a little bit later, but it is an awesome, awesome way to get your foot in the door. She has a dual degree from Wharton and Harvard and is an amazing essay expert as well. All three coaches on here, I can personally attest to how much expertise they have, how good of individuals they are. I am super excited to learn from you on all things essays. You know us a little bit. We would love to get to know you as well. Answer in the chat. Tell me, what is your target program? It could be either your top or a couple ones that you're applying to. And then what part of the application are you most worried or stressed or thinking a lot about? Let us know. This will also help me kind of tailor the questions around what you're going for. So this is helpful. Stanford and essays. Awesome. Well, we've got the squad for you on here. HBS, Jerry, Sloan, Booth, Warren, NYU. Awesome program as well. Cool. Keep them coming. This is super helpful. A lot of competitive schools on here, and as we'll talk about, the essays play a really key part of the application and can really help your story stand out, especially for some of these M7s and more competitive programs. Okay, some of you I think have come from the overview, but just in case this is your first MBA Week event, I want to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. We are kind of your one-stop shop for reaching whatever goals you may have across tests or education or career or truly anything else. We have a ton of coaching experts that you can work one-on-one with, like Dion and Mike. I am a coach. I have a coach. I am so passionate about the role that coaching can play in helping people level up and become the best versions of themselves. It's incredibly powerful to have someone in your corner who's cheering for you and rooting for you and has been where you want to be. We also do a bunch of boot camps or cohort-based courses. We do a ton of MBA ones. They're kind of a truncated, uh, call it a roadmap to getting started on your MBA application. They're super, super helpful to just get the ball rolling. You're in a cohort of other applicants, so you can network with others and kind of feel the pain of the MBA application process. And then we also have Leland Plus, which is an on-demand content library with hundreds of example essays and resumes, video guides from different coaches, templates, resources, everything that you need. Point of all this is that we really want you to get access to the resources that you need to get to get your goal, whatever that may be. And we found that that is very customizable. If it's content, if it's coaching, if it's a course, whatever you kind of need, we've got something for you. My personal favorite part about working at Leland, and I think if you talk to Dion and Mike, it's one of their favorite parts about coaching, is just seeing people win, seeing people overcome these massive obstacles and reaching their goals. Each one of these people got into an MBA program with Leland. I know many of them personally, and we want every single one of you on this call to be on this slide at some point. So let's write your essays and get you into some of these programs. Okay, let's dive into our panel. I really want to start off kind of high level. Dion, Mike, I would like kind of both of your perspectives on this. The MBA application process, more than other grad school like med school or law school, it has a little bit more of a holistic application process. What role do you see the essays playing within that process? Dion, what do you think?
Well, the essays are a critical part of the application. There are many components, and what you're trying to do is really reveal who you are beyond, your stats, your transcript, and your resume. And I think some people sometimes express a little bit of doubt or uncertainty when they hear people say, oh, admissions people tell us we really want to know who you are. But I think, as Mike will attest, that is really true. I sometimes have gotten clients to say, I'll be whoever you want me to be. Or I can do, I feel risky about revealing who I am. I'm just going to play it safe. And I would say that is uh, not a good approach. And your coach can help guide you on um, how to get your true self across.
Yeah, I love that. Mike, what do you think?
So I would support everything that was said. I think I think of the essays as a bit like glue, that sort of pulls together the different aspects of the application and gives it a sort of a fuller sense of structure. Your essays are where you have the most agency in terms of your own voice and really sort of constructing your narrative. You want to look at what are the schools looking for in terms of their criteria And, other parts of your application are either going to help or maybe not help as much as you'd like, address some of those. And so, your essays can sometimes emphasize certain things or provide some context in some other areas. And yet at the same time, as Dione said, your voice has to come through, your personality, a sense of who you are and what your distinct, sort of what distinctly you can bring to the learning community that the school is trying to assemble. I read thousands of applications over my years working in admissions, and I would say that, I mean, there were times where I'd finish an essay and I was crying. It was just so heart-wrenching and profound. Other times I'd be laughing, it's something that someone just had an incredible sense of humor. But the most common, sense that I would have at the end of reading what, was ultimately a successful application was just, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Something would come through in terms of, who the person was and why they should be, here at Stanford. And in my case, in this program this year, this is the right time. And the value proposition goes both ways. They're going to bring something, but also, they're going to get something from the experience. And that can only come through with like a personal statement, a message that you're crafting and providing an explanation. It's not going to come through from a resume or a transcript or a GMAT score. So this is, it's an important component of the application.
Yeah, I love what both of you said. I think the macro point that I really want to drive home here is a lot of people look at the different parts of the application as kind of siloed, right? I'm gonna create my resume and I'm gonna submit that and I'm gonna do my online application and then I'm gonna get my letters of recommendation and then I'm gonna write essays. The best applications, as Mike and Dion both kind of alluded to, they have like a broader kind of narrative or strategy that's going over them. And then your essays is your personal perspective within kind of that umbrella. So instead of looking at your essays as kind of a siloed piece, it's how are they supporting the rest of your narrative? How are they supporting the rest of your candidacy? Okay, awesome start. Let's dive into, okay, we now know how the essay kind of fits into the broader application process. What makes a really great essay stand out? Mike, you mentioned making sense. Like it has a cohesive and understanding narrative. It's credentialed in a way. What else kind of made the top essays stand out from the rest?
I think so. Every school is a little different. Obviously, they have different questions and they construct their essays a little bit differently, and the rest of the application may be a little bit different. And so, how the essay fits into the broader piece, you always have to think about, your application it's a holistic document, and a lot of people look at discrete elements and try to, sort of maximize each one. But you do want to look at the application as a whole and think about what is it this school is really looking to evaluate. And so I always start with clients looking at essays. I mean, obviously there's a central theme or central story that we want to, convey and essentially the essay is going to be constructed, somewhat around that. And oftentimes it's an iterative process to figure out what that is. And at the same time, we also look at what else do we need the essay to, perform essentially in the application. If someone's prior academics weren't all that strong, how do we put that into the, sort of perspective of this person's going to be a great student, when they come to your program next year. If there were some setbacks professionally, or if someone is not necessarily feeling like they're in the right place from a job perspective, what's the broader story that they're telling where they're making progress, even if some of that is through growth experiences and challenges that they've had to face. So there's a little bit of analysis that you want to go through to sort of figure out, like, what are the things that we want this essay to accomplish, in the broader application. But at its heart, I mean, look, I think, whether you get into a school or not, this is a discovery process. And, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I was at Stanford for 16 years. Did I ever meet students that said, yeah, I told the admissions office whatever they wanted to hear, and, that's not really what I wanted to do? Yes, I did. I mean, that was uncommon. It was not usual, but it did happen. But I do remember some very specific cases of students that conveyed that. And my general sense was that they were a little bit lost. They did not have the sense of clear priorities, of a clear vision for themselves, which honestly in business school is really valuable because you can study anything. You can imagine and making a pivot into almost any industry. And the people that are chasing whatever bright, shiny object or whatever the last exciting thing that they heard some classmate talking about, they end up trying to run in six directions at once and not really getting anywhere. And so this, more than just getting into the school, this is also an opportunity to really think about, where you've come from, what influences have made you who you are, and what direction you see yourself moving in. And if you can, make some progress on that and get some clarity about that, not only is your essay going to be much better. Not only is your application going to be much stronger, but you're going to be in a better place regardless of where you end up, at school next year. And Stanford asked this question, what matters most to you and why? And I see it as valuable from an admissions perspective, but honestly, what I saw was it was even much more valuable for people that were admitted, that they had gone through that experience, had really thought deeply about that question. And when they got to business school, which can be overwhelming in some ways, that they were more prepared to say no to a whole bunch of different options so that they could create the space to really drive the change or invest in the areas that were going to be crucial for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's great. Dion, anything to add? That was a really well-rounded answer. Anything to add on what has kind of elevated the best essays in your mind?
Well, I definitely support what Mike has said about the value of self-awareness, research, self-reflection. I look at essays, there are two things that are the key challenges: identifying, refining, developing what you want to say, and then how do you clearly communicate this in an effective way? And so to the second part, I would say, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to be clear and authentic and specific and credible. And um, probably many people have heard this about essay writing, but the value of showing, not telling. It's if you're on reading an application in your admissions team and someone just says, well, just take my word, I am super intelligent, determined, persistent, creative, that is very hard for them to judge. And also, you probably will not come off as the most likable person. So really, the key building blocks of an essay are your specific examples from your life, how you've grown, how you think, how you make choices, and how you contribute and impact other people, organizations, companies.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We're getting such good questions in the chat. We're gonna try and get to them. I'll try and weave them in where they're applicable. It is helpful if you upvote or emoji or like give a thumbs up to the questions that you also like. That will help me prioritize them. Those are great. Uh, Mike, you started talking about this, you both kind of did, about how important self-reflection is and just like taking time kind of to strategize, to think about who you are and what you want to do in the world and what makes you different than other applicants, what your goals are. All of this stuff should come before you actually put pen to paper. We got a question, Mike, that I would love to ask you is related to this. Someone asked, what are some examples of central themes for a strong application? Would you mind speaking to self-reflection generally? And then also, I think self-reflection is where you start to ideate on some of these themes. So any good examples of themes you've seen over the years?
Sure. I mean, I just want to say in terms of, getting your thoughts together before putting pen to paper. I mean, I don't know how many people actually put a pen to paper these days, but one thing I really advocate for is journaling, just to, don't hold back from writing. You don't want to plan out where you've got everything in your head before you start writing. I think the process of writing can be a thought process, but I encourage people to do it in a way where you're not putting so much pressure on yourself to have all the answers figured out, but you're just kind of creating space and, set up a time or a process where you can spend a little bit of time over a period of time, sort of journaling out ideas so that, you start to get stuff out more in that storming space as opposed to like, I've got to be brilliant. So some themes, I mean, look, what are the great themes of life, right? There's, family, there's love, there's loss, there's, success and failure and, dreams and legacy. And, I mean, essentially, I mean, you can go back and look at, Joseph Campbell or all sorts of people that talk about what makes a great story, right? There's always some conflict involved, whether it's person versus person or person versus, death or person versus themselves. You need to sort of think about like what's that sort of conflict or challenge that you struggled with a little bit. Um, something Dion said that, show don't tell and how admissions, reads something, someone saying how, intelligent they are, how effective they are. I mean, I used to hear people saying how humble they are. And I would always, sort of chuckle a little bit when it's someone saying that about themselves. But, I also found that basically when people were talking about all their successes, I found myself a little bit bored. When people would talk about their failures and their struggles, I found myself really interested, even if it was something where you'd sort of say to yourself, like, hey, that's not something I would want to talk about in a business school application. But when someone was able to reveal something, vulnerable about themselves in a way that, um, many people would think about that as being, connoting weakness. And yet there was something where someone who can do that effectively, I mean, it gives a real sense of confidence, of strength, of, resilience that can come through. And so I would say, as you go through this process, there's a tendency where people want to, sort of call out every great thing that they've done in their essays. I would say that's usually not a good strategy. And really think about like what are one or two things that I really want to unpack in terms of, challenges that I've had to deal with or seminal events in my life that have influenced me that that I can express something of myself and talk about, how I reacted to this situation or how I thought about this situation. That's more revealing than, a list of accomplishments. Your resume and the activities and the awards section and all of that can do that much better in your application.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it goes back to your earlier point of what is the essay? It is your one chance to kind of say, this is who I am as a person, not what I've done, but this is what makes me me. And it's a really unique part of the application in that it allows you to do that. It's kind of your voice to the adcom. If you want, I think it's super helpful to see examples of this. Again, Leland Plus has like 100+ examples of successful admit essays. I would go and read those. The thing that I hear from people that are applying is usually business school essays are a lot deeper than you expect them to be, to Mike's point. A lot of times it's, oh, here's why I'm so credentialed and accomplished and why I deserve to go to this program, not the route that you typically want to take. Okay, you've done the self-reflection. I'll also mention that I know Dion and a lot of coaches, there's some on Leland Plus as well, have, if you work with a coach, they have like a questionnaire thing that they will send you that you then go and fill out, and it has all the questions and the prompts. That's a great way to get started if you are working with a coach. See if they have any resources like that to help you start brainstorming. Okay, you've done some of the self-reflection, you've journaled, you've sat down, you've thought about your why and your who. Dion, how do I then take that and actually start writing?
There is no one single way to write an essay. So, what I do think is very important is the preparation. I've actually had the fortune to work with three other leading MBA admissions firms, and try to take the best practices from each in working with my clients. In addition to the questionnaire, we will have like a kickoff meeting that's pretty lengthy so that we can understand what may be important to your story that you may not even realize yourself, you might take for granted. And I think, as Mike had said, one of the important things is helping you to connect the dots so you can explain who you are and where you come from. And importantly, how will you show up in business school and beyond? Every business school has a limited number of seats, and they want to know. Maybe the essay question will be phrased as, what do you want to get out of business school? Why do you want to go to our school? What you as an applicant need to also think of, though, is what will you give? How will you enrich the classroom experience, the community experience for others? I think one of the tips I would say is to kind of put aside the voice of judgment. I have so many people say, well, this is no good, or this is no important, or I did this, but. And I kind of ban the word but. It's more like and. Nobody has had just an unblemished record of success. And as Mike has said, oftentimes it's your ability to overcome challenges and to growth and to admit to failure that is most compelling.
That's great. Dion, how many of your applicants submit the very first draft that they write?
So far, zero.
Yeah, I say that because that also
You've
like
only been at this for what, like a
25
little bit
years.
of time, right?
My clients before, like, look, you want to put your best foot forward. You want to submit something that really represents who you are and or you're confident. So if you're looking for one and done, or me to tell you exactly what to write, this is like, this is not a good fit. A coach at its best will be a partner to you and a sounding board and a guide. But ultimately, you will have to do um, reflection, research, and be willing to lean into the process and believe in yourself and your.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I ask you that because I think writing the essays sounds so scary. It's like, oh, I got to sit down and I got to write these essays now. Literally just brain dump your first one, just try and get a first draft done. It is not going to be the one that you submit, but just getting that first one done significantly lowers that hurdle in your mind. And so now it's a process of, okay, we're gonna iterate. I'm gonna know what I want to take and what I'm not gonna take. So yes, there are frameworks for how to draft. There are things you can do to brainstorm for the different prompts. But at the end of the day, just sit down and try and get it out after you've done your self-reflection, and it will be so much easier continue going after that. The other thing that I'll mention that I heard that we talked about in last year's MBA week is if writing is not something that comes particularly easy to you, or you don't feel like it's the best way to process information, go on a walk and record yourself and just answer kind of the questions to the prompts. That's a good way. If you're more of like an audio processor, that can be a good way to start brainstorming, getting words down as well. Ali, welcome. Glad you could make it. We are talking about drafting essays. Do you want to give a quick 20-second intro to everyone on your background?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm sorry for being late. My name's Allie. I am a 4 or 5 year Leland coach now. I have a background in real estate, private equity, and impact investing. Went to Wharton and also got a dual degree with the Kennedy School. I work with a lot of people from across kind of like traditional finance and consulting who are looking to transition, and also a bunch of other industries related to impact and healthcare. So really happy to be with you. One plug, I was just at boot camp, and while this is free Leland Week events, boot camp is a phenomenal way to get a little bit more granular. And so would encourage you guys to take a look at that as well. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Ali. Okay. We've gotten a lot of questions about specific types of essays, like how do I get started with the Stanford, what matters most and why, or Harvard just switched from its more Stanford-like essay to the three kind of goals, more career-oriented ones. We've kind of separated it into a couple of different buckets. Personal statement essays are these kind of like, who are you? So what matters most to you and why is one of those. Harvard's old, what else do we need to know about you? Would have fit into this bucket. So personal statement essays are these like, who are you and why should we care kind of things. Ali, how would you recommend approaching these kind of story, kind of very identity-based essays?
Yeah, I think they are the hardest essays to write. And apologies, I'm not sure what was covered in the first 30 minutes, but for me, it's all about identifying what your North Star is, and then how can you take the seemingly disparate parts of your experience, whether it's um, academic, volunteer, professional, things that maybe are component parts of your professional experience that you don't necessarily think are relevant to the storyline if you're trying to switch careers, and then like stack them all together. How do you do that? I think what matters to you most and why is the most daunting question. Haas has one that says like what makes you feel most alive and why. That can be something very commonplace. That can be like I feel most alive when I'm in community. That can be I feel most alive when I am helping others grow. And it's all about finding the right anecdotes to like hit on that. So what do? I tell people to date like brain dump, like write down the 20 most important things that you would hand on a piece of paper to someone if they needed to get to know your inner soul. That sounds like creepy and whatever. I go through a process with folks I call business school therapy because that's what it is. You've got to get like emotional, and oftentimes that takes a lot of like just layering and iteration. But literally, if you were, going to a new country or something, and for whatever reason, the visa process was saying, like, I need to know 20 things about you, start there. And then from those anecdotes, you start to fact pattern. And that's kind of how you come to the culling of what that North Star is. And then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I love that. Mike, we've gotten a lot of questions of like, what if I don't have experience after college, or I'm coming from an underrepresented background or a non-traditional background, or I have X hole in my resume, yada yada yada. What do you think about? How do I think about approaching personal statement questions if I feel like I'm not the most straight-laced traditional applicant that has all their boxes kind of ticked? How can I think about using this essay to maybe shore up some of the red flags or the weaker parts of my application, or just really highlight what I want the adcom to know?
Well, I mean, the essay is the opportunity to, to do that. I mean, essentially, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and it's not about the experiences that you've had necessarily. It's about the way that you think, the way that express yourself, the way that you show, how you interpret your experiences and sort of view the world. So. I mean, look, someone who's graduating from college has, if you're 22 years old, versus someone who's say 25, 26, like, how big a difference is that? 3, 4 years? I mean, it's obviously there's experiences you have after college, of your first few years working that are real growth experiences. But in the grander scheme of things, you're an adult and, you've had a lot of, interesting experiences, and you need to, essentially express how the things that you've done in college are proxies, if you will, for, the types of work or, opportunity to work with other people, either in conflict or collaboration, that you're going to see in the workplace. So, I mean, schools, when they're looking at someone who's just out of college, they know to look at the application a little bit differently, right? It's a bit like early stage investing versus a little bit later stage investing. But if you understand what VCs and angel investors do, is they really, they try to understand the potential of, an entrepreneur by understanding the way that they think and how they've approached, similar challenges in their background. And so, someone who's coming out of college, this is your opportunity to do that, to express your maturity as beyond your years, even though you don't necessarily have that, 3 years at consulting or investment banking or whatever, sort of, professional experience that people that are applying a little bit later, bring to the table.
Yeah, I love this point of there's no one right way to write the personal statement essay, which is you'll hear a kind of a theme throughout this session. It's so dependent on what is your story, what is your background, what is your experience, what are the specific maybe gaps in your background that you're trying to fill. A coach can help with that, a mentor can help with that, someone that has kind of an objective third person perspective on you can help with that. I think sometimes we psych ourselves out, we discount ourselves before we've even really given ourselves a chance because we're so biased in our own experiences and in our own perspective. So talk to people. For these ones too. Another trick that I've heard is to, Ali said, give a list of the 20 things that you believe anyone needs to know about you. Go to your parents and your best friends and ask them to do the same thing for you. Say, what if you were introducing me to someone else? How would you introduce me? What do you think my strengths and my weaknesses are? What's unique about me? And just kind of build this personal kind of 360 to not only reinforce your essays and to get kind of those additional perspectives on it. Okay, the other very common type of question outside of those personal statements ones are why this school? A lot of schools will disguise this prompt in more wordy ones. Wharton has one, which Ali knows well, of what will you do for Wharton and what will Wharton do for you? So there's a kind of a why this school very implicit in this. Dion, you mentioned wanting to show making. You mentioned having applicants show what they bring to the particular programs. I think that tip is pretty ingrained in this question. How do you think about why the school prompts and really making kind of a case for a specific program?
Well, I think Wharton is pretty explicit in splitting the prompts in two. Why do you want to? What are you going to get out of Wharton, and then how are you can contribute? But I would urge for all schools to take that approach and think about giving your goals and given who you are and where you are now in life, what do you need to do to learn, to experience in order to achieve those goals? And then tailoring that to the experiences that you will have in business school. So the other thing I wanted to say is the admissions team has the great fortune of being able to choose from many people for a limited number of seats. So, thinking of like a finance or investment team, they're going to be calculating in their head something about the ROI that this person brings. And as an applicant, you want to show that you will be someone who is high reward, low risk. So if you do not have a perfect background, and that's the majority of us, then being aware of and then addressing, not just trying to ignore or hope no one notices shortcomings or gaps is the way to go. And then also clearly articulating what you will bring to the class. And as far as your career vision, your career goals, like what's the so what is the impact that you will have um, on your future colleagues, company, customers, etc.
Sorry, guys, it wasn't letting me unmute myself. That's great. One thing that I want to add, we're getting a couple questions about, well, how do I know what schools are good for me? How do I t tell which schools are the best? One trick that I've heard that well, first of all, talk to people. That's the best way. Every school is kind of looking for different things in people, and you can go online and you can read what they've said, but the best way is to actually talk to the people that were accepted. And if you talk to enough, you'll pick up what the school is putting down, for lack of a better way of saying. And you can start. The best way I think to start by this, very tactically, is go on LinkedIn, go to the alumni of the school, current students and/or alumni, and then find people with one thing that is similar to your background. Maybe they went to the same undergrad. They are in the same industry. They are doing something that you think is really interesting. They've published something, they've written an article or whatever on LinkedIn that you think is that you want to respond to. Find one thing that you have in similarity. Mention that, say you're applying and that you'd love to talk to them for 15, 20 minutes and be grateful for the time that they're spent. But a lot more people are willing to talk to you than you think. Mike, I know you've talked about this a little bit in the events that you've done and in boot camp sessions. Any other advice on figuring out what schools are right for you and how to weave that into the essays?
Yeah, I mean, I think what people said about contacting, current students or recent alums, and sometimes, faculty, there may be others that you're able to network with. Look, I've seen people at Stanford that got more network during the admissions process than some of the students that were there for 2 years. And, I mean, one of the things that the school, wants, they want people that are going to fully leverage their experience when they're there, right? It's like, they don't. You might have the perfect GMAT score and GPA and all this sort of right, jobs on your resume, but they would take someone who's a little bit, scrappier, essentially, who, maybe doesn't have quite that pedigree, who they believe is just going to, dive in and take advantage of everything. So the way to show that is to start doing it before you even arrive. Say, I'm going through this process, and I mean, obviously, you want to use tact. You don't want to, sort of come off as bothersome, but people, I think people are more forgiving than most of us, sort of recognize. We hold ourselves back. And the more that you're willing to, engage and just understand, some of the, part of it is getting to figure out like what are the right questions, and coaches can help with this. Essentially, asking people about some of the seminal experiences that they had at the school. I often found that in the application, in the essays in particular, when people would make mistakes about what was possible or what the experiences were that they were saying they wanted to have at the school, it would decrease their credibility. And so if you can, after you've written up, an essay, if you can have someone who's a current student or a recent alum read it over and just say, there might be like minor nuances here, like correct me if I'm missing anything or if I'm misunderstanding anything. So, those little things, can be influential on the edges, in terms of your application. And the more connections you're able to build with members of the community, A, it's going to, help your application. B, it's going to be a signal to the admissions office that, hey, this person is serious, they've done their homework, and they're engaging in a way that shows that they're going to be an effective student, and they're going to leverage, our ecosystem and the resources that we have effectively.
Yeah, I love that. Super well said. There are many ways to do, there's a right way and a wrong way to do that, right? You're networking with a lot of people. So again, be gracious for their time, be genuinely curious. Don't just be like a bloodsucker. I'm trying to pump you for information. Please send me a referral and I'm gonna use and abuse you and send you on your way. So approach this with authenticity and from a genuine, curious place, and you'll be just fine. Ali also mentioned that they're on schools clubs website, you can find students whose entire job is to talk to students. So there's a lot of resources. Spend time looking for them and using them. There's a lot out there that you can do. Okay, Ali, I would love your thoughts on this. We've gotten some questions on this of maybe my goal for the MBA is not related to what I'm currently doing, but it was past jobs, or I know what I want to do, but it's not maybe directly what I'm doing now. MBA pivots are a very common reason to go to an MBA program. How do I think about articulating my goals, my where I am now, kind of that three-part path that we like to think about of where I've been, where I am now, and where I'm going, and how an MBA fits in there?
Yeah, totally. So I think you mentioned like the pivot category. There's also the push category, which is like, hey, I want to double down, push deeper into and advance in my industry. Um, I think that the way I largely work with students to break down the why the MBA is necessary part is to bucket into like technical categories and leadership categories, right? And so even when you even think about like what the recommenders are asked to do, it's to assess you on your leadership capabilities and like your quantitative aptitude. So it's kind of like that's a helpful framing. Someone had asked in the chat earlier too, like how to differentiate yourself as a traditional candidate. The same things that I think are helpful there plug into the technical side of it. So why am I, what skills do I need to gain? Is it an industry? Is it a function that I want to go deeper in? Is it a geography I need exposure to? Is it a size of company I haven't worked for, stage of investing? So like, let me go through and assess that. And then on the soft skill side, like leadership development is such a broad term and it is your brand of leadership that's so critical. So if you are an investor, like, is it going to investment committee and presenting in front of them in a clear and coherent way and negotiating deal terms with JV partners and lenders? If you're a consultant and you have no management experience, but you've like mini PL'd or mini EM'd, what are you going to do in business school? You're going to work on teams and you're really going to focus and learn how to like lead others and lead from behind and lead with integrity. There's so many other things that you can key into. And so in some ways it's easier to start with like the technical building blocks of those skill sets in order to then like think through what your post MBA goal is. Not always, but often it is helpful to be like, hey, I want to work in this industry and this function. If you are someone who's going to go work in the startup world and there isn't like that's not as clear as a parent, even like saying, hey, I want to work at a fintech company like Blend, which is like a large mortgage firm, right? Or hey, I want to go work at a small boutique healthcare consulting firm, a earlier version of Oliver Wyman, right? So like because there's so much that outcomes have to parse through, helping associate with like cues and brands for better or for worse is good guidance for them to kind of start to assess you against your smaller peer set.
Yeah, I love that because I think a lot of goals, a common mistake or concern that we see is how can I be unique, right? There are so many consultants or everyone's trying to go to business school for kind of a set range of things, right? And I'm going on a similar path than everyone else. I love the idea of splitting it into technical and skills and getting very specific. A lot, if there's one thing, well, maybe a couple things, but one of the things that I think you should take away from tonight is at the surface level, your theme, your trajectory may not be one of one, right? But when you get into the specifics, when you get into like, well, why and how and where have you come from, where are you going? Like and what are the stories that kind of demonstrate that Dion mentioned, that's where you start to differentiate yourself. So don't worry about like having the most unique or crazy career path. It's like, why does that make sense within your application? Mike, you mentioned that, and I would like us to go a little bit deeper into it because I think it's really important. And this is another question that I get all the time is how can I balance applications need to make sense, right? Because the adcoms are saying, do we think this person is going to do what they say they're going to do when they're looking at your application? How can you balance credibility that I am going to do what I say I'm going to do with ambition of like, no, I'm going to do these crazy things and I'm going to get there and it makes sense for me in my background. How do you think about balancing those two kind of poles?
Well, I think, sometimes there's short term and long term, and that gives you a little bit of discretion in terms of how you talk about your goals, right? I mean, short term, like if you're coming from a, I don't know, city government, nonprofit background, you say, I'm going to be a private equity, whatever, this or that. Like a lot of schools are going to look at that and just say, like, hey, maybe one in a million, but, it's probably not likely. And schools think about this, when I would admit someone to Stanford, I was making an implicit promise in a sense that like what they said their goals were, I think the school can help them to achieve it. And so, as soon as I would make that decision and admit somebody, I was sort of taking the burden off of them and putting it on me and others that work at the school to some degree that, we're gonna be there, we're gonna support, we're gonna help you. And, we wouldn't want to do that if we thought that, this was just like an unrealistic sort of scenario. But if you're talking about something that's medium to long term, and if you're able to show essentially like, look, I've got a, a good plan for what I'm going to do over the next 2 to 4 years, right? And then, eventually I'm going to be the next whatever, Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or someone who's going to, shift industries or come up with this, some sort of a radical entrepreneur. That's if it's off in the distance enough, it's not threatening, and if you can articulate it in a way that sounds powerful and exciting, it can be beneficial to your application in that respect. But in terms of short term, you do want to come across as someone who's done the research, who's done the homework, who understands something about the types of transitions that are, I mean, we would look at all the not admissions, the placement data, at Stanford, and we would see essentially like, where are people going into consulting? Where are they coming from? People going into investment banking, into finance, into private equity, where are they coming from? What sorts of transitions are possible? So we had a lot of data. And it's sometimes hard to find that data, but the more research you can do to understand what types of transitions are common, especially out of specific schools. So some schools are really great for making transitions into consulting or into private equity or venture capital. Other schools, like it's a bit more of a long shot. And so just understand, who you're speaking to and what's common, especially when you're talking about what you're going to do right after school.
Yeah, that's great. We're getting some questions about specific schools. That is something that you should do. That's going to be personal to you, so go and work with your coach. The other thing that I'd recommend doing is every top school publishes employment reports every year. So go online and look up like HBS employment or MBA employment report, and it will show you the exact breakdown of how many people from the most recent class went into consulting or finance and what they made on average, and what percent of people got offers or had employment within 90% within 3 months. So there's a ton of data online. Go look at those employment reports, and it'll be helpful. Okay, two more questions, then we'll wrap up. I'm sorry we can't get to all of the questions. Thanks y'all for being so engaged. We've gotten to a lot of them. Hopefully this is helpful. If you have personal questions and things that you want to work on that are kind of individual to your situation, your background, highly recommend working with a coach or a mentor, or just like get a third person perspective on your essays. I cannot testify enough to the importance of just having kind of a credentialed, authoritative second look on your essays and on your application as a whole. Okay, Dion, in your decades of experience as an MBA coach, what are some of the most common mistakes that you have seen people? And this can be in the final versions, it can be in kind of the preparation process. Where do you see applicants often tripping up?
Well, there are a few common challenges. One is where I've mentioned people kind of play it safe, and it's a little bland, a little general. Specifics count. Specifics will give you credibility. It will help the admissions team understand that you've done the due diligence, that you have an idea of where you want to go. Also, at the same time, you can't try to cram in everything. It's too much. And I don't really like the term, personal brand, but pick two things, pick three things you really want to be known for and curate the many aspects of your life in what will become your overarching theme. Oftentimes, I find something that's value-based or something to have to do with your personal quality is a great way to go. And then I've already mentioned is the essays are very important. They are one point. They are one component of your total application. So you want the essay to provide complementary, meaning additive information, definitely not contradictory, which actually happens more than you might think, and definitely not redundant. You have a limited um, opportunity through your writing to share who you are. So don't waste it by confusing people, by being unclear, um, and by being redundant.
Thanks, Dion. Those are great. Mike, I'd like all three of your coaches, your guys' perspectives on this. Mike, what are some common you see with people that you've worked with?
With MBA, with the essays. I
Yeah.
think, sometimes, especially for Stanford, Harvard, people don't necessarily really address the question straight on. You finish reading the essay, what matters most to you and why? And I'm kind of like, well, so what was the answer here? They talked about three or four things, or they listed a whole set of, they basically walked me through their resume. I mean, ultimately for, any essay, I would say you should be able to boil down your answer to one sentence. Obviously you're going to sort of do a lot more in the essay and go into a lot more detail, but you should really be clear with yourself that if you had to explain it in just, 20 words, what would that answer be, and be able to articulate that effectively, and then sort of build your essay from that. So I would say that when someone comes away and doesn't really understand it. The other thing that I would just say is someone who's read a lot of applications, you do need, like, the first quarter of whatever essay, it has to provide enough context or provide enough interest that someone's gonna read the rest of the essay. It's like 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. I've read 12 applications. I've got three more to go, and my brain's foggy. And I'm trying really hard to pay close attention. But when I start and someone seems to be kind of meandering and wandering, and it's not getting to the point, it's sort of like you've lost me by the sort of second or third paragraph. And so you need to make sure that your introduction to your essay doesn't feel sort of I don't know, sort of navel gazing. You want to make sure that there's something there that sort of speaks to the reader and gets them engaged.
Yeah, I love that you and Dion just kind of described the two poles of mistakes that we see, of like the reiteration of the resume, of I'm just going to re-explain every single thing that I already told you that I have done. And then on the other side, you have a flowery, beautiful narrative that doesn't actually answer the point, or is a little bit overly dramatic, or just like it doesn't answer the question to what you said. Avoid both of these. If you can find the place in the middle that Mike and Dion and Allie have all talked to, if you're specific, you're answering the question, it is credible to your background and your interests and what you want to do in the world. That's kind of that balance that you want to hit. And again, a coach is so valuable here. And we're not just saying that. It's because we've seen it over and over and over again, that if you get a third person perspective, if you have someone who knows what they're doing, who has sat on that table and evaluated essays and kind of tell you, hey, this is how that's going to be evaluated, or here's how I would be looking at that, or let's change this up. Allie, what's a common mistake that you have seen?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to add, and I think those are both amazing points, the vulnerability piece, which is coming up a lot in the chat, right? So, yes, specific, like not getting specific enough is really critical, but also striking the right tone of like, how much am I going to share? And oftentimes I see people do what I say is like, tell rather than show. And so what again, it goes back to the anecdotes and the pattern recognition. Like, what have you done? What is your lived experience? And in terms of vulnerability, there's a time and a place to bring in hardship, but it is not necessarily explainable in like the 100 words that you can dedicate towards like why you're so passionate about something. So that it, depending on what it is really great for the optional essay. But and most of the time, I tell people to show me like through demonstration and anecdote. But actually, when you're like just trying to boil down the essence to Mike's point, which is like you should be able to tell me the whole thing in 50 words. That is more appropriate for the show part, or excuse me, the tell part. So just get down to brass tacks, and it's very difficult, but like there's only so much about like your personal health issues and like lost jobs and like again, all of it's really critical to what has made you you. And there's a very tactful way to introduce that. But to Amelia's point, and like yes, longtime Leland stand, but also like working with someone who understands what tone to strike. I think someone used the word or the question like, "Hey, what vibes should I go for?" It's like people on this panel who have seen it and can really be helpful, or a bazillion other coaches on Leland that are equally as amazing.
Awesome. Okay, we're wrapping up. I would love, we've talked about it a lot. Thank you again for your engagement, your questions. This has been great. And coaches for your time. Your insights have been awesome. Final tip, or this can be one thing that you want everyone here to kind of walk away with. It could be a reiteration of something that we've talked about. It could be something that we haven't had time to touch on. I will go first, coaches, and give you a second to think. First one, we saw there was a comment that how do I kind of overcome the fear of vulnerability and of putting myself out there with this? And to that, I'll say, if you don't try, you've already failed. You might as well just try. And then the second thing that I will say is these institutions are amazing. They are not the arbiters of self-worth or truth or all of these things. You are worth so much more than an MBA application essay, and you need to tell your story, and you can do it in an authentic way. But you matter, and you are smart and hardworking and deserving and all of the things outside of if you get admitted to a program or not. And if you don't get in, you can reapply. There's other programs. There are so many ways to have a successful career outside of getting into a great business school. Although we are here and we want to help you get into a great business school as well. But remember that your worth takes precedence, and that is separate from these essays and from the process. Okay, coaches, top tip, one thing that you want to leave everyone with tonight. Dion, what is yours?
I think to start early, to give yourself the time again for the research and reflection, and to allow yourself to lean into the process and think of the essay not as like, oh, I this is kind of a drag. I have to do it. It's so awkward. But look, reframe it as an opportunity, each supplemental essay, an opportunity to share more about yourself. If there were no essay, there would be so much that you could not get across.
That's awesome. Great last point. Mike, what is yours?
I would say, especially with the more reflective, like personal statement essays, what matters most to you and why, or, tell us about yourself, is to do it for yourself, sort of make sure that the end result is that, you feel like you've been able to express yourself effectively, have been able to, come to terms with some, sort of deeper thought process that helps you to, know where you stand, know a little bit more about, what makes you tick and your values. And then, as Dion said, as Amelia said, I mean, essentially, like the school can, take it or leave it. Like, you'll have a long life, and there's going to be many opportunities for you to, sort of find ways to make an impact and develop yourself. But if you do this in a way where you feel true to yourself and feel like you've gotten something out of the process, like, I mean, you're already ahead, and I really do believe that is, I do believe that the admissions process and sort of a well-formed admissions process is the beginning of the leadership development, sort of education that you get in business school. And so, if you can approach it that way, it'll sort of keep the motivation going when, you're sort of hitting some, doubts or, sort of concerns.
Well said, Mike. Thank you. Allie, bring us home.
I think it's taking some time to understand how you're going to contribute outside of yourself and also thinking about all those people who contributed to you to get you to where you are right now. So that goes to your recommenders, that goes to your family, your friends, and also like what are you going to like the HBS question, what are you going to do with your one wild and crazy life, right? Like how are you going to like improve society as a like you can do it in so many ways, but everyone on this call is so privileged to be in the seat that they're in and have the opportunity to even apply to business school. And so I think it's just taking a moment for gratitude. And as I mentioned in the chat, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like mental health is so, so, so critical. So take the time. You guys are well positioned at the beginning of June to apply for round 1 or round 2. So you'll do great. Wishing you lots of luck.
Thanks, coaches. Y'all have got this. You can do it. We believe in you. Huge, huge, huge thank you to Dion, Mike, and Allie. They're here of their own volition, spending their evening helping us navigate these MBA essays. So if you haven't done so already, if you would join me in the chat, thanking them. Thank you, coaches, so much for your time. And the great thing about Leland is that you can work with any of them if you would like. MBA week is a great way to kind of see the different coaches and experience their expertise and which ones you may be interested in working with if you want to go down the coaching path at all. You can scan their QR codes we've sent there. You can go on to Leland and search them and you'll find them. Dion, Mike, Allie, thank you so much for being here. This is only the first day, and there's so much more value that's coming. They'll cover letters of recommendation and specific types of people, tech and veterans and all types of MBA things and women in MBA. So whatever, go to all the sessions that you can. Again, try to attend as many of them live. I promise you'll find value. You'll get your questions asked. Get coaching, sign up for a strategy call if you would like to get matched to a coach if you're not sure who to get started with. And then again, just join us for the rest of MBA week. They're all free and there's so much value here. And so I'd recommend you make the most of it. Thank you for joining us for this evening. I know there are many things that you could be doing with your time instead of hopping on a Zoom recording with us. So thanks for being here. Everyone have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of MBA week. We'll see you later.
Much.